Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am back after a 2-week break. I'm gonna get this out of the way right now. I'm still really hard at work with this project that I'm doing, still at my mom's place, as you can tell. The uploads, I'm going to try to be as consistent as I can. It just might not be on a Wednesday that it is uploaded. It might be on a Thursday or a Friday, but I'm going to try every week to get a video out because I still want to be bringing these things to you every week. But if I skip a week, I'm so sorry. Work is just getting, needless to say, this is me saying, this is me trying to keep the videos up and coming so that I can keep giving you these amazing stories because I have so many amazing stories to keep on talking about. But if the upload is not on a Wednesday, then it'll be on a Thursday. If it's not up on a Thursday, it'll be on a Friday. That's gonna be up at some point during the week. Anyway, on to the story. Okay. Climate change. The science is simple yet complex. In May of 1859, Irish physicist John Tyndall discovered that with the sun's rays, carbon dioxide and water vapor were among the gases that warmed the planet, aka the greenhouse effect. With his discovery, it laid the foundation for understanding not only greenhouse gases and climate change, but weather and meteorology. At least that's what the history books say. In the Herstory books, that discovery credit goes to Eunice Foote. Let's get started. Eunice Newton Foote was born on July 17, 1819 in the very small town of Goshen, Connecticut. Now, when I say small, I mean small. In the 2020 census, the population was 3,150 people. In the 1820 census, the population was 1,585. So this place small. Her parents were Thurza and Isaac Newton Jr., who is a distant relative of the Sir Isaac Newton. So we know where she got her brains from. Distant freaking cousin or nephew or wherever he freaking falls into of Isaac freaking Newton. Her father was a farmer and an entrepreneur in East Bloomfield in New York. Now, I couldn't find what he made exactly, but whatever it was, it brought quite a bit of wealth to the family. But he essentially lost it all through speculation, which is a term in finance meaning the purchase of an asset with the hope it will become more valuable in a short time. Speculation can also refer to short sales, which the speculator hopes for a decline in value. Now, this is different from an investment, and I'm not going to get into that because finance makes my brain hurt. Eunice was one of 11 siblings, 6 sisters and 5 brothers. In 1820, the family moved to Ontario County in New York to be closer to her father's entrepreneurship in East Bloomfield. When the father died in 1835, the 5th sibling, Amanda, took on the challenge to rid the dead properties of her father, and she became the sole owner in order to keep the family farm from being sold. Now, the area where Eunice grew up was the epicenter of social activism, so she would have been exposed to women's rights campaigners, abolitionists, dress reformers, mystics, and temperance advocates. She went to a pioneering women's preparatory school called the Troy Female Seminary. Founded by feminist Emma Willard, who dedicated her life to education, the girls were encouraged to attend the neighboring private research university, Rensselaer School, to attend science classes. These classes were run by Amos Eaton, whose innovative methods included lectures in scientific theory alongside experiments rather than memorizing things. Eunice attended the schools from 1836 to 1838. Let me quickly tell you why this school was so revolutionary. Besides the fact that unlike typical all-girls schools, it had science, this school allowed the students to challenge and better themselves every week to elevate. This school allowed the students to challenge and better themselves every week to elevate their moral gaps. At the Rensselaer School, the girls could study astronomy, meteorology, chemistry, geography, even natural philosophy, which I actually had to look up what that is, and it's the study of physics in nature and the universe, and was basically dominant before modern science. Jumping ahead to the 1840s, Eunice married a lawyer in East Bloomfield named Elisha Foote Jr. on August 12, 1841. In 1844, Elisha bought a house for him and Eunice at a sheriff's sale, which is a type of government auction, and the couple moved in 1847. This is interesting to me. To describe her looks a bit from the standpoint of Eunice's 1862 passport application, it describes her as 5'2", blue-gray eyes, an oval face, dark brown hair, a shallow complexion, and a, quote, rather large mouth. The couple had two daughters, Mary, who was born on July 12, 1842, and Augusta, born on August 24, 1844. They were both raised in Seneca Falls. Elisha became a judge at the Court of Common Pleas in Seneca County, but resigned in 1846. Couldn't find why. But he continued to work as a lawyer, and Eunice built a casually built a laboratory in their home. You know, because who doesn't build a laboratory in their freaking house? While living in Seneca Falls, the family was a neighbor and Eunice was a friend to suffragist Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And the both of them attended the first Women's Rights Convention, the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention. Eunice was a member of the editorial committee for the convention. As such, she and her husband were co-signers of the convention's Declaration of Sentiments, which is a document that was signed by 68 women and 32 men out of the 100 to 300 attendees. The document was based on the Declaration of Independence and borrowed language from the anti-slavery movement. The document stated that, quote, all men and women are created equal, end quote, and said that women would take actions to claim the full rights of citizenship that was denied to them by men. Equal freaking pay, bro. All right, time to get sciencey. Did anybody else in school like science except chemistry? I loved everything of science. Bio, physics, astrology. I love astrology. Chemistry was just a mess. At this time, Eunice is an amateur scientist, and the idea that the atmosphere trapped heat was pretty well known already, but not the cause of it. Now, why exactly she decided to go this route of experimentation is unknown. But if we look historically, which you know of course I had to do, by the 1800s, human activities were already rapidly adding CO2 to the atmosphere because the American Industrial Revolution was starting to really kick off. With improvements to steam trains in 1769, the Boston Manufacturing Company built its first textile mill in 1814. John Deere invented the freaking steel plow, which I just need to go back really fast. For some reason, I didn't know that John Deere was an actual human being until I actually did this stuff. I thought that John Deere was just a cool name. But yeah, John Deere invented the steel plow in 1837. Now you freaking know. I didn't know. The Bessemer process for making steel was invented in 1856, which started the massive production of steel. All of this was done by the time we get to Eunice during her little experiment. I mean, the freaking transatlantic railroad wouldn't be connected for another 14 freaking years. Perspective. So I, for one, think that with all of these factors, Eunice was curious as to what this was doing to the Earth's atmosphere, and how she found this groundbreaking and historical discovery, when you think about it, is violently simple. For context, this was the biggest debate going on in the scientific community. Why are mountain peaks colder than valleys, even though mountains are closer to the sun? Science. Eunice did a series of experiments that showed the interaction of sunlight on different types of gases. We gotta come up. She's contemplating, so I'm going to make the choice for her. Specifically, air, carbon dioxide, or CO2, which, by the way, was called carbonic acid gas in her time, and hydrogen. How she did this experiment was that she took an air pump, 2 glass cylinders, and 4 mercury thermometers. She then placed 2 thermometers in each cylinder, pushed the pump to vacuum the air from one cylinder to another while compressing it. Once both cylinders were at room temperature, they were put in the sunlight, and as they rose in temperature, it was measured. Hi. Eunice also placed the cylinders in the shade for comparison in temperature. She did a few other things, but the words were too sciencey for me to decipher. That alone was a little bit hard to figure out. She found that the amount of moisture in the air affected the temperatures. She specifically found that the cylinder filled with CO2 became hotter than the other gases when exposed to sunlight. Quote, "The receiver containing this gas became itself much heated, very sensibly more than the other, and on being removed, it was many times as long in cooling." End quote. Eunice found that when CO2 got to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, the amount of moisture in the air is what changed the temperature. How this specifically affected the Earth, she theorized, quote, "An atmosphere of that gas would give to our Earth a high temperature. And if, as some suppose, at one period of its history, the air had mixed with it a larger proportion than at present, an increased temperature from its own action, as well as from increased weight, must have necessarily resulted." End quote. Basically, hot CO2 equals global warming. Got it? All right, moving on. Eunice put her findings in a paper called Circumstances Affecting the Heat of the Sun's Rays in 1856. When she did, she became one of the few female scientists to publish her findings. She then submitted her paper to the 10th Annual American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS, that was held in Albany, New York on August 23rd, 1856. It is unknown as to why she submitted her paper to the Right. It is unknown as to why she submitted her paper to the AAAS and why she herself didn't present her paper to those in attendance. Now, yeah, the fact that this is coming out of my mouth infuriates me. Women were allowed at the conference and were allowed to speak. But A, many women didn't attend the conference, and B, many male, of course, scientists had sexist views about the, quote, intellectual capacities of women. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Eunice's paper was read by Joseph Henry, the first secretary of the Smithsonian Institute. Which, quick sidebar, I read that and I was like, the Smithsonian existed in the 1850s? I Googled this and I am so upset at myself that I did not know this, or maybe I did, I just had a brain block. Turns out the Smithsonian was established on August 10th, 1846. 176 years ago. I might have known that. I highly doubt that I didn't know that the Smithsonian was almost 200 years old, but the point is I did not, and I Googled that, and now I know that, and now you all know that. We're all going to move on now, because we all know that. Joseph, reading Eunice's paper, was in theory so that the audience might take it seriously, saying, quote, "Science was of no country and of no sex. The sphere of women embraces not only the beautiful and the useful, but the true." End quote. You might think we have an ally here in Joseph, but we don't, because this guy later discounted Eunice's findings in a New York Daily Tribune article about the presentation, saying, quote, "Although the experiments were interesting and valuable, there were many difficulties encompassing any attempt to interpret their significance." End quote. Since a chick did it, we don't really need to take it seriously, and it's kind of confusing because women words are confusing. Let me give you even more of a picture as to why Eunice's findings are not only groundbreaking, but also as to why she is truly a forgotten pioneer of climate science. Eunice's paper was published in the 1856 edition of the American Journal of Science and Arts. Now, aside from astronomy, Eunice's paper was one of the first known psychics. Physics. Eunice's paper was the first known physics publication in a scientific journal by an American woman, but her paper was not included in the AAA annual publication, even though it was submitted and read. Anyway, much more importantly, summaries of Eunice's work were included in scientific journals all over the world. Summaries of her work were in the 1857 editions of the Annual Scientific Discovery and the Canadian Journal of Industry, Science and Art, the 1856 German Annual Report on the Progress of Pure Pharmaceutical and Industrial Chemistry, Physics, Meteorology, and Geology, the 1857 Edinburgh New Philosophical. The 1857 Edinburgh New Philosophical Journal, and the 1856 Scientific American Magazine. The authors were so impressed with her theories and, having done experiments of their own, said, quote, "This, we are happy to say, has been done by a lady. She was deeply acquainted with almost every branch of physical science," end quote. So her research at first had made it. In the late 1770s, a Genevan geologist, meteorologist, physics, and mountaineer, random, Horace Benedict de Saussure, had used similar equipment that Eunice had used and found that altitude changed solar heat inside a cylinder. In the 1820s, French mathematician and physicist Joseph Fourier theorized that atmospheric gases trapped solar heat. However, neither realized that the increase in solar heat was done by CO2 and water vapor, which is what Eunice found. Now let's talk about the guy that gets all the credit for discovering global warming, John Tyndall, which I mispronounced his name in the beginning. I'm so sorry about that. John Tyndall was a very influential Irish physicist who rose to fame in the 1850s for his scientific study of diamagnetism. I am amazed I said that correctly. Which is basically, from what I could figure out, materials that are repelled by a magnetic field. If I thought that wrong, let me know. He published more than a dozen scientific books that brought state-of-the-art 19th century experimental physics to the masses. Most notably, he made the connection of atmospheric CO2, or what is now known as the greenhouse effect, in 1859. He published his work titled Note on the Transmission of Radiant Heat Through Gaseous Bodies in the Proceedings of the Royal Society, which was a research journal of the Royal Society in London. He gave credit to a French physicist, Claude Pouillet's work on solar radiation through the atmosphere. He had no mention of water vapor, CO2, or even the freaking climate, till his fourth publication on this topic. It's unclear if he knew of Eunice's work or just didn't find it relevant. To his credit, he correctly pointed to infrared light from Earth's surface as the source of the heating in the greenhouse effect, which Eunice did not. Now, I'm not saying that he did not do major things in the science world. However, he is not the one who discovered the effects of greenhouse gases. Eunice did. I'm just saying, the fact that this guy has 2 mountains, 2 glaciers, and a freaking crater on the freaking moon named after him, and he didn't discover greenhouse gases first, is a bit much. Look, all this is a bit much. We're gonna take a break because we have a lot more to talk about. I'm gonna go pet my cat. Eunice began another experiment in 1857 on static electricity. Because why not? She called her experiments electrical excitation. Her studies tested the moisture content and certain gases in the air that could generate static electricity. To have the freaking brains to just do this stuff, I'm just saying, would be so much fun. Her hypothesis was that electric charges and fluctuation in the pressure in the atmosphere might explain Earth's magnetic field and polarity. Cool. Even though her hypothesis was incorrect, she did find that by expanding or compressing the air, the moisture content changed, which affected the amount of static electricity that could be generated. I know exactly what just came out of my mouth. Basically, this happens, I guess. She titled her paper about the findings on a new source of electrical excitation, which was once again read out at the AAAS conference on August 14, 1857, once again by Joseph. This time, her paper was published in the Proceedings of the American Association of the Advancement of Science, and her paper was the first work in physics to be included in the journal by an American woman. Another freaking awesome thing with her, during the 19th century, only 16 papers on physics were published by an American woman, and the only 2 that were published before 1889 were Eunice's. Boom. In spring of 1860, Eunice and her family moved to Saratoga Springs, New York. Their daughter Augusta started private school, and Elijah began a private practice and became a specialist in patent law. In 1865, Elijah was appointed to serve on the Board of Examiners-in-Chief for the United States Patent and Trademark Office as an apprentice. When he got that job, the family moved to Washington, D.C. It was there that the daughters finished school and got married. Now, this is awesome. Mary married John B. Henderson in 1868. John was a U.S. Senator from Missouri, co-author of the 13th Amendment, and an advocate for the 15th Amendment that would give former slaves the right to vote. So we really like this guy. At their ceremony, obviously John being a senator, many dignitaries attended, including, just the measly 17th President of the United States, Andrew Johnson. Wow. The following year, Augusta married a coffee importer from New York City, Francis Benjamin Arnold. Oh, I forgot to mention, Eunice and her husband are inventors as well. Elijah filed a patent in 1842 on thermostatically controlled cooking stove that Eunice invented. So essentially, this chick invented the freaking cooking stove that you can turn your thing to measure the temperature on it. This chick just casually finds out how greenhouse gases work and invented the freaking stove. The reason why her patent was in her husband's name was because since she was a married woman, she would not be able to defend her patent in court. Even though I'm just saying her husband is kind of in the United States Patent Office, maybe he could help her out a little bit, but hey. When her friend and neighbor Elizabeth visited Eunice at the patent office in 1868, Eunice told Elizabeth that in her opinion, half of the patents filed were inventions done by women. But since men controlled all the money needed to bring their ideas to physical form, the men took all the women patents and claimed it as their own. She is so not the heck wrong. Funny thing though, in 1857, Elijah was given a pretty dang big settlement for infringement on Eunice's stove invention patent. Don't know if he shared the money with her or what, but Eunice would eventually file a patent in her name on a shoe and boot Foote insert in 1860. The insert was made of a single piece of vulcanized rubber, which I had zero clue what that meant. And this is just nuts. Otherwise known as vulcanization is a process of hardening rubber. Think tires, rubber hoses, conveyor belts, kids' toys, insulation, and freaking erasers. Her invention was to, quote, prevent the squeaking of boots and shoes. So what this chick did was basically invent the bottom of your shoe. So that then when everybody walks around, it didn't sound like a freaking basketball field. In 1864, Eunice invented a new cylinder type of paper-making machine that allowed for better quality wrapping and printing paper that could be manufactured at a lower cost. She's inventing wrapping paper now. Reportedly, a company in Fitchburg, Massachusetts used her machine and reported that it saved them $175 per day in raw materials. $175 is $3,051 in today's money. Hi! Hello! Oh my God! This is my mom's dog Maisel, everybody. Welcome her to the channel. After Elijah completed his apprenticeship, he was appointed Commissioner of Patents from July 25th, 1868 to April 25th, 1869. When his term ended, he stayed on the Board of Examiners-in-Chief for the next several years. He and Eunice lived in East Bloomfield in 1872 and in 1873, but went back to D.C. in 1874, but then had to go back to New York in 1878 and finally settled officially there in 1881. It was while visiting their daughter Mary in St. Louis, Missouri in 1883 that Elijah died in Mary's home. After her husband's death, Eunice lived between Brooklyn and Lenox, Massachusetts. Eunice Foote died on September 29th or 30th, 1888 in Lenox, Massachusetts at the age of 69. She was buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. Eunice's work on climate warming fell into the abyss of unknown women that found and did badass things. Scientists and journalists across the board agreed that since she was a woman, an amateur scientist... What are we doing? Want to get down? Okay, hold on. I'll help you. An amateur scientist and an American woman scientist was a factor in her falling into obscurity. In 1902, Susan B. Anthony made a speech calling on young feminists to take the reins from the founders of the suffrage movement, like, quote, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Eunice Newton Foote, Mary Livermore, and Isabella Beecher Hooker, end quote. Eunice's rediscovery can be attributed to two factors. Many in the historian and scientific community simply didn't disregard her papers on climate warming and static electricity. And when the internet was invented, an article published by retired petroleum geologist Ray Sorensen in January of 2011 in the American Association of Petroleum Geologists journal, Search and Discovery, renewed interest in Eunice. Director of the Climate Science Center at Texas Tech, Catherine Hayhoe, stumbled on Eunice's paper trying to answer a question posed by colleague Patricia Solis about the lack of early female climate researchers. Eunice's work is now recognized as the earliest known scientific research that showed the existence of greenhouse gases and its potential effect on the climate. In 2018, Cornell University Press released the textbook Communicating Climate Change, a guide for educators, that confirmed Eunice's work preceded the work of John Tyndall, which I will say once again, it is still unclear whether John knew about Eunice's work or not. Eunice's published work in 1857 is now acknowledged as the first time an American woman's work was published in the AAAS journal. In 2022, the American Geophysical Union established the Eunice Newton Foote Medal for Earth Life Science to recognize extraordinary scientific achievements in research that focuses on the merging of earth and life science. Eunice's rediscovery could not be coming at a better and more prevalent time in our Earth's climate history, as CO2 levels are higher than ever, specifically 50% higher than before the Industrial Revolution, which was when Eunice made this discovery. We must heed and hear her words in her discovery in 1856 on CO2 and our climates now more than ever. Quote, "An atmosphere of that gas would give our Earth a high temperature." All right, there you go. The story of Eunice Newton Foote, the woman that we can thank for discovering greenhouse gases and the effect on them, specifically CO2. When I first discovered this, it was around the time when not only were we getting record-breaking heat, but it just so happened that Google did a doodle of her. Just pretty freaking awesome timing. If you learned something today, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And while you're down there, please leave a friendly comment. I will be back next week with my darndest of try with another video. And until then, do not be well behaved. You just might make herstory. See you next time, guys.